The courtroom smelled of polished oak and stale expectation. Everything about the space was designed to intimidate, from the vaulted ceilings to the rows of wooden pews that creaked under the weight of judgment. Yet, on this particular morning, there was something else hanging in the air. Not just curiosity, not just procedure. A storm was coming, but no one knew where it would break. Deputy Logan Pierce sat straight at the plaintiff's table, his uniform crisp, his chin lifted. Confidence radiated off him like heat from asphalt. To the casual observer, he was the portrait of a dedicated officer, decorated, well-spoken, composed. Across the room, Janelle Carter sat in silence. She wore a fitted charcoal blazer, no jewelry, no makeup, and a pair of shoes so plain they almost dared you not to look down. Her hands rested on her knees, her posture upright, her face unreadable. She hadn't spoken a word since entering the room. She didn't need to. Her silence was deliberate, not the silence of fear, but of discipline. Spectators filled the gallery, some whispering, some watching. A few officers in uniform lined the back wall, arms crossed, expressions carved from granite. Reporters hovered in side aisles, fingers twitching over notepads. But the air shifted the moment Janelle entered. Not because of who she was, no one seemed to know that yet, but because of how she moved, like someone used to scanning for exits, like someone who didn't see this room as power, but as terrain. Her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, no relation, sat beside her, visibly younger. Suit slightly too new. Fingers drumming on a legal pad. He looked at her twice. She didn't look back. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise," he announced. "Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Raymond Whitmore presiding." Everyone stood. Judge Whitmore entered, robes flowing, eyes scanning the room, not with impatience, but with calculation. He looked at Logan, then at Janelle, then back again. "You may be seated," he said. The room settled, and so began the day where a man in uniform would speak first, and a woman with nothing left to lose would wait in silence, holding the truth like a blade no one saw coming. Deputy Logan Pierce took the stand like he'd done it before. Not just once or twice, often. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew the weight of his uniform and how to use it. He swore the oath, sat down, adjusted his tie. Then he looked at the jury the way a practiced preacher looks at a small-town congregation, not to explain, but to reassure. "This won't take long. Just trust me." The prosecutor stood with measured ease. "Deputy Pierce, please walk us through the events of the night in question." Pierce nodded, voice smooth. "It was approximately 9:40 p.m. I was responding to a call about suspicious activity behind a row of closed businesses on Alder Street. When I arrived, I observed a woman, Miss R. Carter, standing near the back entrance of a dry cleaner." He paused, just enough for the mental image to settle. She appeared agitated, was holding her phone, pacing. I exited my vehicle, approached, and asked what she was doing. She didn't respond. When I asked a second time, she raised her voice and became combative. His voice remained calm, measured, believable. I asked for identification. She refused. When I informed her she was loitering on private property, she became physically aggressive, shoved me with both hands, tried to walk away. He looked down briefly, then back up, face composed, almost regretful. I attempted to de-escalate, but she struck me in the chest with her forearm. I feared for my safety, so I moved to restrain her. During the struggle, she reached toward my duty belt, possibly for my weapon. At that point, I made the arrest. A few murmurs rippled through the gallery. Jurors sat straighter. A woman in the third row blinked slowly, as if absorbing a familiar narrative. The prosecutor continued. "To be clear, Deputy, did you feel you were under threat?" "Yes," Pierce replied. "She was physically stronger than anticipated, aggressive, uncooperative. And you followed proper procedure." "I did." And your body camera? Pierce hesitated a fraction of a second, then recovered. Malfunctioned. I reported it. There's documentations. The prosecutor nodded. No further questions. Pierce leaned back, hands folded neatly in his lap. From across the room, Janelle didn't move. Not a blink. Not a breath out of place. Benjamin scribbled a note, scratched it out, then scribbled another. His hands couldn't keep still, and Pierce, under oath and unshaken, looked for all the world like a man telling the truth. But some truths are built like stage sets. They look solid until someone pushes. Logan Pierce stepped down from the witness stand like a man finishing a well-rehearsed monologue. He didn't smile, but at the corners of his mouth tugged slightly, the way someone might after executing a clean lie without catching resistance. He sat back down, shoulders high, eyes sweeping across the courtroom as if to silently say, "That should do it." Across the room, Janelle Carter didn't react. She didn't twitch, didn't glance at anyone, not even her attorney. Her hands remained still in her lap, fingers loosely interlaced. Her gaze stayed fixed on the same point since the trial began, the wooden trim behind the judge's bench. Steady, focused, unflinching. Pierce glanced at her, just for a second, and that's when it started. A flicker of something unfamiliar crept across his face. It wasn't recognition, it wasn't guilt, it was closer to unease, like a predator catching a glimpse of something it doesn't understand and realizing, too late, it should have studied longer. Benjamin Carter noticed it too. He'd been nervously tapping his pen until that moment. But now he paused, watching Janelle the way a strategist watches a chessboard, noticing that she hadn't broken once, not even when Pierce spoke of her like a wild animal in the dark. That wasn't passivity, that was control. He leaned toward her, whispered under his breath, "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, didn't even turn, but her eyes shifted just slightly, and he knew what that meant. Let him speak, let him build it, let him believe he's safe. Benjamin sat back slowly, something cold and thrilling sliding down his spine. He suddenly realized this wasn't Janelle's defense. This was her setup. The courtroom didn't shift all at once. It tilted gradually like a house settling, just enough for the floorboards to creak. Judge Whitmore adjusted his glasses and glanced down at his notes, but his eyes kept lifting again and again toward Deputy Pierce. Not because Pierce had stumbled. He hadn't. Not technically. That was the problem. His story had too many clean lines, too few pauses, no wrinkles, no gaps. Real memory doesn't work like that. Truth stutters, lies rehearse. One of the jurors, a man in his 60s with a veteran's posture, began tapping his thumb against the arm of his seat, slow, rhythmic. Another, a younger woman near the end of the row, scribbled something, then underlined it twice. No one was looking at Janelle. They were all looking at him. Pierce sat tall, but something about his jaw had stiffened. He kept glancing down at the tabletop, now breaking the rhythm of his earlier confidence. Benjamin Carter felt it too. There was no flash of vindication on his face, just a shift in breathing, a recalibration. He knew the jury wouldn't say it aloud yet. They wouldn't whisper it to each other, but the seed had been planted. Something's off. The prosecutor, still standing, cleared his throat and gestured as if to continue, but the moment had slipped. Whatever grip he had during Pierce's testimony had loosened. Janelle still hadn't moved, still watching, still calculating. She didn't need them to doubt loudly, she just needed them to start asking quiet questions. And they were. The judge glanced at the clock. 10-minute recess, he announced, rapping his gavel once. We'll reconvene shortly. Chairs scraped, papers rustled, conversations started in low hums. The tension didn't break. It just scattered into the corners of the room. Pierce leaned over to whisper with his attorney. His eyes weren't scanning the jury now. They were tracking Janelle. She hadn't stood. She remained seated, composed, as if the break didn't concern her, as if time itself bent around her pace. Benjamin stepped toward her, lowering his voice. You sure you don't want to speak before the recess ends? She glanced up at him. Not cold, not warm, measured. I will, she said, when it matters. He sat beside her, frustrated. Look, Janelle, I need to know what I'm walking into. That video doesn't exist yet. The judge is watching you like he's trying to decode a threat assessment. And Pierce is too confident for a man who should be cracking. You said we'd have something. We will. Benjamin exhaled, pushing a hand through his hair. Why do I feel like you're not defending yourself? You're planning something. Janelle looked at him for a long moment. There was no anger in her gaze, only weight. The kind of look soldiers give each other before a breach. This isn't just about proving him wrong, she said quietly. It's about showing them who I really am. And some things can't be rushed. Benjamin opened his mouth, then closed it. Across the room, Pierce stood and stretched his back, rotating his shoulder like an athlete warming up for the second half. But something in his movement had changed. A hesitation, a crack in the mask. He caught Janelle watching him. For a moment, barely a second, he held her stare, and something flickered in his eyes. Not recognition, not respect. Uncertainty. As if his instincts, honed by years of unchecked power, were sounding an alarm his brain didn't understand. He looked away first. Benjamin saw it. He leaned in again. What exactly did you do before this? Janelle turned back toward the front of the courtroom. You'll find out, she said, same time he does. The gavel would return soon. So would the truth. But it would not arrive gently. The gavel struck again, sharp, final. Court is back in session, Judge Whitmore said, his tone more clipped now. Defense may proceed. Benjamin Carter rose slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with shaky fingers. He wasn't nervous. Not exactly. He was just aware that whatever was about to happen, he wasn't in control of it. Your Honor, he said, glancing toward the bench, the defense calls Janelle Carter to the stand. The room went still. Even the whispering stopped this time. Janelle stood without hesitation. No deep breath, no dramatic pause. She moved like a machine that had already calculated every step, because she had. She approached the witness stand with a posture that didn't ask for respect. It commanded it. A few jurors leaned forward. The veteran in the front row narrowed his eyes, as if sensing something he couldn't quite place. Janelle raised her hand, swore the oath, and took her seat. Benjamin stepped forward. Miss Carter, thank you for... She cut him off. I'd like to start with a clarification. Benjamin blinked. Go ahead. Her eyes scanned the jury direct, unwavering. The officer's story is well constructed, she said, polished, practiced, rehearsed, but it doesn't match reality, and I know that because I've trained people to do exactly what he just did, control a narrative under pressure. Pierce shifted in his seat. Janelle continued. He says I was aggressive, that I escalated, that he felt threatened. She leaned forward, voice firm but calm. But if he truly felt threatened, he would have put his hand near his weapon first, not on my arm. That's instinct. That's muscle memory. And Deputy Pierce claims to have 10 years of field experience, which means either he lied about the threat, or he forgot his training. Her tone was surgical. Judge Whitmore adjusted in his seat. Benjamin cleared his throat. Miss Carter, can you describe what actually happened that night? She nodded. I was walking, alone, on a public sidewalk. I stopped to check my phone because, yes, I had taken a wrong turn. That's all. And then I heard him shout before I even saw him. Flashlight in my face, demanding ID, no explanation, no introduction, just assumption. And your reaction, Benjamin asked. I asked why I was being questioned. He told me to shut up and hand over my ID. Did you raise your voice? No, she said, but I didn't lower my eyes either. And sometimes, that's enough. Gasps stirred at the edges of the gallery. Benjamin stepped closer. Did you assault Deputy Pierce? No. Did you resist arrest? I questioned authority without trembling. She replied, that's what he took as resistance. And the claims that you reached for his weapon, her jaw tightened. If I had reached for that weapon, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Someone would be dead, and it wouldn't be me. The room froze. Janelle's eyes didn't waver. Not from Pierce, not from the jury, not from herself. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a defendant defending herself. This was a tactician reclaiming her terrain, and no one, not even Judge Whitmore, knew what was coming next. She stood without needing to be told. Janelle Carter rose from her seat and moved toward the witness stand with the calm of someone who'd crossed more dangerous terrain than a courtroom aisle. No tremble in her step, no glance at the crowd, just quiet, unshakable resolve. Benjamin Carter, now sitting at the defense table, looked up at her with a strange mix of awe and fear. He still didn't know the full story, but he was beginning to realize he didn't need to. Her presence alone was telling it. The bailiff gestured to the stand. Raise your right hand. Ma'am. She did. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. I do, she said, clear, steady. And then she sat across the room. Deputy Logan Pierce didn't even try to hide his smirk. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, radiating the same smug certainty he had the day he first took the stand. But that certainty began to fray the moment Janelle spoke her first sentence. I wasn't resisting, she said. I was remembering how not to break his arm. The room stilled. Even the stenographer looked up. She let the words linger in the silence long enough for everyone to feel their weight. Excuse me, the prosecutor said, arching an eyebrow, unsure if he'd heard her right. I didn't resist arrest. Janelle clarified, her tone still even. I restrained myself, because when someone grabs your wrist with aggression, muscle memory kicks in. Training takes over, and mine told me to disarm and disable. Pierce's smirk twitched. Benjamin leaned forward slightly, hands clenched beneath the table. The prosecutor tried to compose himself. Let's go back to the night in question. Ms. Carter, can you describe your behavior at the scene? I was standing on the sidewalk, she said, checking my phone for directions. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't trespassing. I wasn't obstructing anything. I was just black at night in a place someone decided I didn't belong. The honesty of it hit like a slap. The prosecutor's mouth opened, then closed again. Judge Whitmore adjusted his glasses, not interrupting, just watching. Janelle turned towards the jury not with desperation, but with clarity. Everything that followed started from that moment, a decision that I was a threat before I ever said a word. I've seen that look before across borders, in combat zones, through sniper scopes, but it stings more when it comes from home. I'll tell you exactly what happened, Janelle said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It simply landed like truth dropped from altitude. She folded her hands in her lap and began, not like a victim reliving trauma, but like a tactician walking through coordinates. It was 9:43 p.m. I had just left my friend's apartment. I stopped at the corner of Alder and 9th because I wasn't sure if I took the right turn. I pulled up my phone's GPS, stood beneath a street lamp. That's when I noticed a flashlight in my face. Deputy Pierce, the prosecutor, asked. Janelle nodded once. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I needed help. His first words were, "What are you doing here?" And he didn't wait for an answer before demanding my IDs. And how did you respond? The prosecutor asked, trying to sound neutral. I asked why he needed it. She said, I wasn't in a restricted zone, I wasn't breaking a law, and in this country, asking a question shouldn't be interpreted as aggression. Somewhere in the gallery, A quiet exhale broke the stillness. He told me not to get smart. Sambas, wan samba. And when I repeated my question, he stepped forward and grabbed my arm. Did you try to pull away? No, she said simply. I told him to remove his hand from me. He didn't, so I centered my weight, stabilized my balance, and counted to 3. Why? To stop myself from responding the way I was trained. She answered, because the first thing they teach you in combat operations is how to end a threat in 3 seconds or less. I didn't want to be that woman on the news. I didn't want to be the story you only learn about when it's too late. And a long pause. And then he slammed me against the hood of his patrol car, handcuffed me, and told me I was under arrest for assaulting an officer. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. The prosecutor leaned in. You're saying Deputy Pierce initiated the contact? I'm saying, Janelle replied, he expected me to shrink, not to speak. She turned to the jury again, gaze steady, and when I didn't give him fear, he tried to take my freedom. The prosecutor stepped closer now, pacing like a man trying to close a net. Ms. Carter, he began, voice tightening. Would you describe your tone during this exchange as respectful? Janelle didn't even shift in her seat. I'd describe it as measured, but not submissive. No, she said evenly, respect doesn't require submission. The prosecutor narrowed his eyes. So you questioned his authority. I questioned his approach. She corrected, authority doesn't excuse aggression. A ripple stirred through the jury. He took a breath. Frustrated. Let's not dance in semantics. You challenged a law enforcement officer during a field encounter. That's a dangerous thing to do. Wouldn't you say? For who, she asked, her voice suddenly sharper like a scalpel, not a sword. The room hushed. For the person holding the weapon, she continued, or the person questioning why it's drawn. The prosecutor hesitated. She leaned forward slightly, voice dropping, eyes never blinking. Would you consider it dangerous? She asked. To ask why your arm is being twisted behind your back when you've committed no crime. His mouth opened, closed. Janelle let the silence settle before continuing. You're trying to turn my composure into guilt, my calm into calculation, but I was calm for one reason only, because I've been trained not to escalate, because I've seen what escalation looks like, and because, unlike Deputy Pierce, I know how to end a confrontation without violence. He stepped back, grasping for footing. Janelle turned once again to the jury, as if gently reminding them who was truly under fire. I didn't come here to argue. She said, I came here because I was forced to defend my freedom from a man who thought a badge made him untouchable, and now he's realizing it doesn't. The prosecutor tried to recover, flipping through notes with the desperation of a drowning man searching for land. Let's address the body camera, he said, voice brittle. It's documented that Deputy Pierce's camera malfunctioned during the incident. Are you suggesting it was intentional? Janelle tilted her head slightly, like a professor entertaining a lazy question. I'm suggesting that a pattern of selective malfunction is no coincidence. A few jurors shifted in their seats. The prosecutor raised a hand. That's speculation. Janelle nodded. It is, but so is everything he said without footage to prove it. She let that settle, then continued. I've worn more cameras than I can count during combat missions. Raids, live extractions. I've operated tech in sandstorms, under gunfire, submerged in seawater, but somehow, his body cam failed on a dry sidewalk in Montana. Pierce, from his seat, clenched his jaw. Judge Whitmore didn't intervene. He was watching her too closely. Janelle turned her gaze toward the jury. If your only witness is a camera, and that camera always breaks when someone like me is involved, maybe the issue isn't the hardware. The gallery murmured low, growing. The prosecutor interrupted. Tone sharper. So you're accusing a decorated officer of manipulating evidence? No, Janelle said, "I'm accusing a system of letting decorated officers know they can fail upward, unchecked." Benjamin looked up from his table, stunned by the precision of the blow. She hadn't just gone for Pierce, she'd struck the infrastructure that held him up. The prosecutor tried one last time. "You have no footage. Mrs. Carter, no other witness, no corroboration, so why should the court take your word over his?" Janelle didn't blink. "Because I don't need footage to tell you the truth, but he needs a broken camera to hide it." And with that, the first crack became a fissure. The room felt it. Pierce's confidence was no longer wounded, it was bleeding. The tension in the room had thickened, ready to snap. Benjamin Carter stood slowly. The prosecutor had just finished hammering the lack of footage like a final nail, but Benjamin had been waiting for this moment like a sniper on a rooftop. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the defense would like to submit new evidence video captured by a bystander at the scene." The room froze. Even the gavel hesitated. Pierce blinked, then looked at his attorney, who looked like he'd just swallowed glass. The judge leaned forward, his voice razor-sharp. "Mr. Carter, this is the first I'm hearing of this. Why wasn't this submitted earlier?" "It was just obtained." "Your Honor," Benjamin replied, "it's unedited, raw, captured by a civilian who was in a parked car nearby. Timestamp matches the night in questions." The prosecutor stood. "Objection. Chain of custody is unclear, and the footage's authenticity hasn't been—" "Sit down," Judge Whitmore said flatly. "We'll see the video. Now!" The bailiff moved quickly, inserting a USB into the courtroom's display system. The screen on the wall flickered, then lit up with grainy footage from the dashboard of a car parked across the street. The angle was imperfect, partially obscured by windshield glare, but the audio was sharp, brutally clear. Pierce's voice came through first. "Don't get smart with me," he barked. Then Janelle's voice, calm, low, unshaken. "I'm standing here, checking my directions. Why are you grabbing my arm?" The footage showed the officer stepping into frame, hand reaching for Janelle's wrist. Then, no flailing. No shouting, just a clear image of Pierce slamming her against the patrol car with unnecessary force. Her voice again, "I'm not resisting. Let go of me." And then the line that sucked all the air from the room, "Women like you don't get to ask questions." The gallery gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Judge Whitmore's gavel struck once, then twice, but no one really heard it. On the screen, the bystander's camera continued to roll as Pierce handcuffed Janelle. She never fought back, never moved first. The video ended in silence. When the footage stopped, the room didn't speak. Pierce sat frozen, jaw slack, color drained. His attorney leaned back like the ground had opened beneath him. The prosecutor stood, then sat. There was no rebuttal for that. Judge Whitmore broke the silence. "Mr. Pierce, do you still stand by your sworn testimony?" No answer. "Deputy," the judge repeated, firmer now. Pierce looked up, eyes wide, voice gone. And in that moment, everyone saw it. The man in uniform wasn't wearing armor. He was standing in rubble. The courtroom emptied slowly, like a battlefield after the last shot. Janelle remained seated, hands folded in front of her. The picture of composure, the video had shattered Pierce's testimony, but she hadn't flinched. Not when the recording played, not when the gallery reacted, not even when Pierce's silence exposed more than his words ever could. Benjamin was pacing now too fast for the narrow defense space. He kept shaking his head, muttering to himself. "That video," he whispered, stopping only to look at her. "You knew it existed." Janelle didn't answer right away. She looked straight ahead, watching the judge gather his notes. The bailiff speak quietly with the clerk, the last few spectators drifting out in a daze. Benjamin leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "You didn't tell me." Still, no reply. He exhaled sharply. "You sat there and let him lie under oath. You let them drag your name through the mud, knowing that footage existed the whole time. I didn't know it for sure, she said calmly, but I had a feeling. He blinked. A feeling. She turned to face him now finally. Her voice softened, but it was firm. People record everything. Anger. Injustice. It invites witnesses. Even if they're afraid to speak, I didn't know who, or when, or how, but I believed someone had seen it. Benjamin sank into his chair. You gambled. No, she said. I trusted truth to surface. It always does eventually. He studied her face. There was no triumph there, no gloating, just a kind of deep, earned stillness. You realize what this means, he said. This changes the whole trajectory of the trial. We could stop here and win. She looked at him for a long beat, then quietly, but that's not the mission. Benjamin paused. What mission? Janelle glanced toward the empty jury box, then at the seat where Pierce had just crumbled. Justice isn't just clearing my name, she said. It's exposing how many names never get cleared, how many stories end before they're told. There was a gravity in her voice that made Benjamin straighten. He hesitated, then asked the question he'd been afraid to ask since day one. What aren't you telling me? Janelle didn't respond immediately. Then, almost too soft to hear, there's one more thing, one more truth. Benjamin leaned forward. Janelle. She stood, picking up her blazer from the back of the chair. I'll tell you tonight, she said, but not here, not yet. She walked toward the exit, the heels of her shoes clicking in rhythm, calm, precise, purposeful. Benjamin remained seated, eyes locked on the closed door she had just passed through. He had just watched a lie collapse in open court, but something told him the real earthquake hadn't hit yet. The street was quieter than usual that night, as if the whole town were holding its breath. Janelle's house stood tucked beneath a canopy of pine trees at the edge of town, the porch light casting a soft, unwavering glow on the gravel driveway. The courtroom chaos had ended hours ago, but inside her living room, the war was only beginning. Benjamin Carter parked his car and stepped out slowly, as if approaching a sacred place. His nerves were not from fear, but reverence. He had watched Janelle dismantle a seasoned officer's testimony with a voice that never trembled. Yet, she had held something back, and he knew tonight he would finally see it. She opened the door before he knocked. No makeup, no court-ready blazer, just a simple navy sweatshirt and black joggers. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her face bare. Focused was sharper than he'd ever seen. Come in, she said, voice calm. Benjamin entered. The living room smelled of cedar and quiet strength. No clutter, no softness, just a bookshelf lined with titles like Psychological Warfare and Leadership Under Fire. A framed photo of a younger Janelle in fatigues, and on the mantel, a folded American flag sealed behind glass. She didn't offer tea, didn't sit. Instead, she walked to the cabinet, pulled out a leather binder, and placed it gently on the table in front of him. Is that what I think it is? He asked, almost whispering. My record, she replied. It's time you knew. He sat, hands hesitant. When he opened the binder, his breath caught. Military commendations, mission logs, honors. A photo of her in full combat gear, saluting with a team behind her. The trident pinned to her chest said everything. You were a SEAL, he asked, blinking in disbelief. I wasn't just a SEAL, she said. I led Black Ops teams in 3 continents. I briefed presidents. I buried friends whose names no one will ever know. Benjamin closed the binder slowly. His hands trembled now. You could have ended this case on day 1. I know, she said. Walking to the mantel, she touched the glass of the folded flag, fingers lingering, but I didn't want to win because of what I used to be. I wanted to win because the truth is enough. For once, he watched her, silence thick between them. But now he asked, She turned. Now, the truth needs help standing. The next morning, the courthouse stood under a gray Montana sky, silent and cold like a tomb waiting to be opened. By 8:30 a.m., the steps were already lined with reporters, onlookers, and more police than usual. Word had spread. Something had shifted yesterday. Officer Pierce's once confident narrative had cracked, and now everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Benjamin Carter stood by the defense table, flipping through his notes without reading them. His nerves, once obvious, had calcified into a strange calm. He knew what was coming. He had seen the binder. He had touched the truth. Then the doors opened, and everything stopped. Janelle walked in like the silence before thunder. She wore a sharply tailored dark blue blazer, with a single pin on her chest, a small golden trident, unobtrusive to the ignorant, unmistakable to those who knew. In her hands, folded with precision, was an American flag, aged, worn, and sacred. Every eye in the courtroom followed her as if pulled by gravity. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Officer Pierce, seated across the room, flinched when he saw her, not because of what she wore, but because of what she carried. Benjamin stood up, instinctively straightening his tie as if saluting. Janelle didn't glance around, didn't perform. She walked with the quiet dignity of someone who had walked into darker rooms than this. She placed the flag gently on the defense table. No words, just placement. Judge Whitmore entered moments later, his face betraying an almost imperceptible flicker when he saw her. "This court will come to order," he said. Everyone stood, and then but the flag remained. A folded silence sat beside her like a second defense attorney. The prosecutor glanced at her, then at Pierce, whose face had gone pale. Lips pressed into a tight line, his jaw twitched. The arrogance that had wrapped around him for days was unraveling. Thread by thread, Benjamin leaned over and whispered, "They see you now?" Janelle didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her presence had already testified. And for the first time since the trial began, the room didn't belong to the court, it belonged to her. Deputy Logan Pierce adjusted his collar, but the stiffness in his throat had nothing to do with the fabric. He sat on the witness stand once again, posture rigid, trying to resurrect the confidence that once came naturally, but this time, the courtroom didn't feel like his stage. The warmth of camaraderie from the back row of uniformed officers felt distant. Benjamin Carter stood a few feet away, hands behind his back, voice calm. "Deputy Pierce, remind the court again, when exactly did your body camera malfunction?" Pierce shifted, approximately 2 minutes into the encounter. "And that was before or after you made physical contact with Miss Sutz Carter?" "Before." Benjamin nodded slowly. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" The room didn't laugh. It didn't need to. The silence was sharper. Pierce tried to deflect. "I filed a report. Equipment failures happen all the time. But you've never had one during a use of force incident, correct?" Pierce hesitated. "Not personally. No." Benjamin took a slow breath and walked toward the table. He picked up the flag Janelle had carried and held it, not waving, not showing off, just holding, like weight in his hands. "Deputy Pierce," he said softly, "when you shoved my client against your patrol car, did you know you were assaulting a woman who led SEAL team missions across 3 continents?" Pierce's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed. "You didn't," Benjamin continued, "because you didn't bother to ask. You didn't see a citizen. You saw a threat. You saw someone who questioned you. And that was enough." Pierce turned toward the judge, searching for refuge, but none was offered. "Objection irrelevant," the prosecutor barked. "Overruled," Judge Whitmore said without blinking. "Let him finish." The prosecutor sank slowly into his chair. Benjamin stepped closer. "So I ask again. Deputy, When you slammed her into the car, when you claimed she reached for your weapon, when you called her one of those women, were you telling the truth? Pierce's lips moved, but no sound came out. A tremor passed through his jaw, not from rage, from collapse. For the first time in this trial, Logan Pierce looked exactly like what he was, exposed. Janelle rose from the witness stand not with anger, but with precision like a soldier choosing her moment. Judge Whitmore had granted her permission to make a final statement. The courtroom held its breath again. It had become a familiar ritual by now whenever she spoke. Even the air seemed to pause. She stepped forward, not behind the stand, but into the open space before the judge. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was calm, but every word cut clean. You've heard what happened to me. You've seen how quickly a lie can take root when it's spoken in uniform. She looked at the jury, her eyes steady. But what if I hadn't worn this pin, she asked, touching the golden trident on her chest. What if I were just another black woman walking home at night? No record, no uniform, no flag folded in a glass case. She let the question hang. No one moved. Would anyone have believed me then? She said, more softly now. Would I be here alive, speaking, or would I be a headline, a number? A name whispered in protests no one listens to. Benjamin sat motionless, jaw clenched, eyes glassy. This trial isn't about whether Deputy Pierce lied. That's clear now. This trial is about the system that allowed his word to stand unchallenged, unquestioned, unexamined for so long. She turned slowly, facing the officers seated in uniform at the back of the courtroom. I served this country. I've bled on foreign soil for people I never met. But when I came home, the fight didn't end, because here, the battlefield wears a badge, and the enemy wears silence. Murmurs rippled across the gallery. Even the prosecutor lowered his eyes. Don't honor me for my service, she continued. Honor the people who don't have medals to prove they matter, the ones you don't see, the ones you don't hear. A long pause, and then, with a quiet breath, because the truth didn't save me, I did. She stepped back, not with triumph, not with drama, but with the kind of grace that comes only from someone who has nothing left to prove. The silence she left behind was louder than any applause. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath through 100 lungs. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, elbows resting on the bench, hands clasped. His expression had hardened not out of anger, but gravity. It was the look of a man who had seen too many gray areas finally collapse into black and white. He glanced at the jury box. 12 men and women, all silent, all still. Then he turned to Deputy Logan Pierce, who sat now like a man watching the tide swallow his own footprints. This court has reviewed the testimony, the submitted video evidence, and the prior record of both parties. Judge Whitmore began, his voice slow. Even, what we've seen here is not merely a dispute of facts. It is a mirror held up to a system too comfortable with one narrative and too quick to dismiss another. He looked at Janelle. You have reminded this court and everyone in it that truth requires more than evidence. It requires the courage to stand when standing costs something. A pause. To the matter at hand, the jury finds that the defendant, Ms. Janelle Carter, acted in self-preservation under unlawful detainment. The charges of resisting arrest and assaulting an officer are dismissed with prejudice. Gasps swept the room like a wind. Pierce blinked, as if the verdict hadn't registered. The prosecutor lowered his head, fingers curled into a fist against his temple. But this court isn't blind to what enabled this case to happen in the first place. The judge continued, and while I cannot issue legal punishment for bias, I can acknowledge its presence and urge those within this system to confront it. Then, turning to Janelle one last time, Ms. Carter, you're free to go. No cheer, no clapping, just silence, and the slow scrape of her chair as she rose. Benjamin stood with her. No words were exchanged. They didn't need any. Every step Janelle took toward the doors was a step reclaimed from falsehood, from fear, from the hands that once tried to define her. As she passed Pierce, he looked up, eyes bloodshot, mouth slightly open. She didn't even glance his way. Outside, the gray sky had broken into blue. The courthouse doors swung open, and Janelle stepped into the sunlight like someone emerging from a cave unburned, but changed. No cameras chased her, no microphones shoved in her face. The reporters had spoken too soon yesterday, written too many half-truths. Now, they stood quietly, notebooks at their sides, unsure of how to write about a woman who had rewritten the narrative without shouting. Her navy blazer fluttered gently in the wind. The folded flag was in her hands again, not held high, not paraded, just carried close. Like memory, Benjamin walked beside her, eyes squinting at the light, the weight of the last few days pressing down on his shoulders, and yet, for the first time, he looked taller. "Say something," he said quietly, "just for the record." She paused on the top step, then looked at him. "I don't want to be a record," she replied. Down below, a small group had gathered, not protesters, not supporters, just citizens, watching, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. One older black woman nodded slowly, eyes filled with quiet tears. A teenager held her phone in one hand but didn't record. She just watched. Janelle descended the steps slowly, every stride deliberate. She wasn't marching, she wasn't fleeing, she was leaving. Behind her, the courthouse loomed like a monument to everything she had just endured and dismantled. In front of her, the street stretched wide beneath a sky that finally seemed honest. She passed the police cruiser where it all began, empty now, parked like it had no more power. As she reached the sidewalk, Benjamin stopped. "What happens now?" he asked. Janelle looked ahead. "Now," she said, eyes fixed on a point far beyond the town square, "now I go home, and tomorrow I wake up and remember that truth doesn't walk itself. Someone has to carry it." He didn't reply. She turned the corner and disappeared from view. No applause, no headlines, just a woman walking into the light stronger than what tried to break her, and quieter than the lies she outlived.